My name is Helen Grace Thornton. I'm 78 years old, and I have been married for 52 of those years to the same man, Arthur Thornton. Together we built Thornton Hardware, one of the most trusted construction supply chains across 3 counties. We started with one small shop in Charleston, South Carolina, in 1974. Back then, we used to count nails by hand, and Arthur would personally deliver sacks of cement on his back. I was always by his side, doing the books, sweeping the shop floor, making coffee for the workers. We had nothing but dreams in each other, or so I thought. But last Friday, as I poured him his morning coffee like I had done for over 5 decades, he looked at me with disgust in his eyes and muttered just one word under his breath. Useless. My hands trembled so much I spilled coffee on the counter. I asked him, "What did you say, Arthur?" He didn't even look at me. He just grunted and added, "You heard me. You don't do anything anymore. You're just here." I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of him. Instead, I walked to the back office and opened the old, dusty cabinet where we kept our original business documents. I had kept the original incorporation papers, partnership contracts, and deed titles hidden under floorboards in a folder labeled, "Emergency Use Only." Arthur had forgotten what was in there. He never noticed when I updated the papers 6 years ago to give me silent majority ownership. 51%. At the time, it was just for legal protection in case anything happened to either of us. But now it was my weapon. So I took the keys to the office, walked into our lawyer's office, and by sunset, Thornton Hardware no longer belonged to Arthur Thornton. Belonged to me. He didn't even know it yet. Not until the next morning when he walked into the store and saw the locks changed, his name removed from the signage, and every employee reporting directly to Mrs. Helen Thornton. He stood there blinking at the door. "Helen," he said, "what is the meaning of this?" I looked him straight in the eye, calm as the sea. And I whispered, "You said I was useless, Arthur. So now I'm just taking out the trash." But that's not even where this story starts. Let me take you back to the beginning. To the girl who met Arthur at a church picnic. To the young woman who gave up everything. To the decades of love, betrayal, secrets, and sacrifice that led to this moment. And to the storm that was still coming. Because Arthur wasn't going down without a fight. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe that no one should ever be underestimated. Especially not a woman who built everything from scratch. Next chapter is coming, and trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. I met Arthur Thornton on a sticky July afternoon in 1971, at a community church picnic just outside Charleston. I was 24, fresh out of nursing school, wearing a polka-dot dress my mother had sewn for me. Arthur was 32, charming, ambitious, and already dreaming about opening a hardware store. He wore confidence like a custom suit, and when he spoke, people listened. I should have seen it then, how he liked being the center of everything. But I was too young, too in love, and too eager to build a life. He told me he didn't want a nurse. He wanted a partner. Someone who could build something with him, not just tend to sick people. I was flattered. He painted this grand vision, Thornton Hardware, a family name etched into brick and cement forever. And the way he said forever made my stomach flip. So I said yes, not just to marriage but to every part of his dream. I left nursing behind and started learning about bolts and budgets instead. I helped secure our first loan, wrote our first ledger, and even worked the front counter when he was out on deliveries. When we couldn't afford a storefront, we sold from a shack we rented from his uncle. I scrubbed floors pregnant, skipped meals to keep the lights on, and stayed up counting inventory after putting our son, Daniel, to bed. But people don't remember that part. They remember Arthur as the strong businessman with the booming laugh. The face of the brand. And that was okay for a while because I loved him. Believed in us. Until he started believing the praise too much. It started small. Him introducing me as the Mrs. instead of my partner. Then came the banquets and events where I wasn't invited because, as he said, "It's a business thing, honey. You'd be bored." He started handling the finances alone, even though I'd kept our books for 20 years. And when I asked about it, he'd laugh and say, "Relax, Helen. It's all under control." Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was just a phase, that men sometimes change after success. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to shame him. I believed loyalty meant silence. Then I found out about Lacey. She was 30, worked at the front desk of our second branch in Goose Creek. Pretty, bubbly, always calling Arthur sir with a giggle. I had my suspicions when he started working late more often. But one evening I went to bring him dinner, his favorite butter-baked tilapia, and found them in the back office. Her lipstick was on his collar, and his belt was unbuckled. He froze. She scrambled. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the plate. I just stood there. I think the silence scared him more. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "It's just stress relief." Stress relief. That night, I cried into my pillow until my ears rang. And the next morning, I made him breakfast like nothing happened. Because that's what I was trained to do. Keep the home steady. But something changed inside me. I started making copies of everything. Business accounts, property deeds, payroll records. I created backup files and stored them in places he'd never check. Inside the false bottom of our bedroom drawer, behind the photo albums he never touched. I met with a lawyer quietly, using my maiden name. I made myself invisible, while I prepared for war. Because I knew that one day, Arthur would say something he couldn't take back. And when he did, I needed to be ready. Years passed. Lacey got married and left. Then came another assistant. Then another. And I just kept cooking dinner, clipping coupons and waiting. Waiting for the moment he'd forget I was the reason this empire existed. That moment came when he looked at me over his morning coffee and said I was useless. That word didn't just cut. It burned. Because I had given everything. My body, my youth, my dreams, my entire life to build Thornton Hardware. And now he wanted to erase me. Well, I wouldn't be erased. I would be remembered. So I pulled out the papers I'd revised quietly years ago. Documents giving me majority ownership. Documents he signed without reading, trusting the little details to his wife, the woman he now called useless. And now I was the legal owner. But I wasn't done. Because revenge is not just about power. It's about precision. And the next thing I did was walk into our office and call our biggest supplier, and cut Arthur off completely. But that was just the beginning. Because when Arthur finally found out what I had done, he didn't just explode. He made a phone call that would change everything. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever been underestimated, forgotten, or dismissed, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Next chapter is about to reveal the move that nearly destroyed everything I built, and how I fought back. The next morning, Arthur didn't storm into the house like a man on fire. He strutted. His shirt was crisp, his cologne thick, and that smug look on his face, the one he wore whenever he thought he had things under control, was plastered right there beneath his thinning gray hair. I was sitting at the breakfast table, slicing strawberries into my oatmeal, calm as a silent river. He placed his leather briefcase on the counter with a loud thud and turned to me with a fake smile. "You had your fun, Helen," he said. "Cute little stunt with the papers. Very clever." I didn't look up. "It wasn't a stunt, Arthur. It was a correction." That wiped the grin off his face. "You think you can just take my company from me," he growled. "I built that place." I looked him dead in the eye. "We built it. And now I own it. Legally. Irrefutably." His jaw tightened, but he didn't yell. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he left. Quietly. But I knew him well enough to understand what that silence meant. Arthur had gone to make a phone call. I followed him, secretly, an hour later just to be sure. I took my old sedan, parked across from the strip mall near our lawyer's office, and watched from behind tinted sunglasses. There he was, standing outside with his back straight, hands in his pockets, pacing like a cornered lion. Then he pulled out his phone and called someone. I couldn't hear, but I could see the way his shoulders squared, his hand gesturing angrily, his lips mouthing words like undo, fraud, and you owe me. I didn't know exactly who he was calling yet. But it wasn't until the next day, when I walked into our office and our general manager wouldn't make eye contact with me, that I realized what Arthur had done. He had begun his quiet campaign to reclaim everything, through manipulation, bribery, and guilt. The employees were torn. Most of them had worked under Arthur for decades. They saw me as the sweet old woman who brought them muffins on Sundays. They didn't see me as a boss. That was by design. Arthur had made sure to keep me in the shadows so he could be the sun. And now, with me in charge, they didn't know who to follow. At noon, I found out he had already contacted 2 of our biggest vendors, claiming the business was under internal dispute. He told them not to ship anything until it was resolved. One of them pulled a $60,000 order on us. Just like that, the employees started whispering. Some even called him Mr. Thornton in front of me, as if I were some outsider who stumbled into the wrong room. And then came the lawsuit. A thick envelope arrived at my door 2 days later. Arthur was suing me for fraudulent misrepresentation, claiming I tricked him into signing over the business. His argument was that I abused marital trust and used emotional leverage. The gall. This man who slept with secretaries who called me useless was now claiming I betrayed him. I sat with that envelope on my lap for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just thought back to every year I'd spent keeping that business alive while he played king. The nights I skipped sleep to balance the books. The day I helped save the company during the 2008 crash by refinancing the house without telling anyone. And I remembered the most important detail. Every document had his signature, his legal consent, his initials in ink. I wasn't afraid of the lawsuit, but I was afraid of the narrative. Because Arthur wasn't just going to fight me in court. He was going to fight me in people's minds, in our community, in our church. He was going to paint me as the bitter, scheming wife. And I knew how easily people believed that story when it came from a man in a suit. That was when I knew. I couldn't just win on paper. I had to win in public. So I did something I had never done in 50 years. I called a press conference. Well, not a press conference exactly, but I invited every employee, every vendor, every investor, and every long-time client to a business update luncheon. We rented out the town hall. I paid for the food myself, and I prepared a speech. The night before, I stood in front of the mirror, holding a brush like a microphone, trembling with doubt. Could I really pull this off? Then I remembered the look in Arthur's eyes when he called me useless. And I steadied myself. The next afternoon, I walked into the hall wearing a navy blue dress suit I hadn't touched in 20 years. My hair was pinned back neatly. My heels clicked against the floor with purpose. Arthur was there. Course he was. He stood at the back with his arms crossed, daring me to crumble. But I didn't. I walked to the podium, took a deep breath and began. My name is Helen Thornton. And for 50 years, I have been the quiet partner behind Thornton Hardware. Today I'm done being quiet. I told them everything. From the days of scrubbing floors pregnant to discovering Arthur's affairs. From saving the company with my own assets to being called useless in the kitchen of the very home I built with him. I told the truth. Every gritty, painful, empowering word of it. And when I finished there was silence. Then a few people clapped. And more. And then thunderous applause. But I wasn't done. Because just as I stepped away from the podium, Arthur made his move. He stepped forward, smiling like a wolf in sheep's skin, and said into the mic, "Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled. This is a woman scorned. And she's going to destroy the company with her bitterness." The room turned cold. Eyes darted between us. Some people sat back down. Others looked unsure. Then someone stood up. It was Martha Jenkins, one of our longest employees. She cleared her throat and said loudly, "Sir, with all due respect, you wouldn't have had a company to lose if it weren't for this woman." The room erupted. Arthur's face drained of color. And in that moment I realized, I wasn't just winning. I was rewriting the story. But just as I started to feel the rush of victory, something happened that shook me to my core. A man walked in through the back door. He wore a blazer, held a briefcase, and made a beeline for the stage. He handed me a second envelope. Opened it. Read the first line. My knees buckled. Arthur had sold the land beneath all 3 stores, 2 months ago, without telling me. The stores may have been mine now, but the land was his, and he was planning to evict me. If this chapter left you breathless, you're not alone. Drop a comment if you've ever had to fight for what's already yours. Like, subscribe, and come back for the next chapter, where I fight to keep the very ground beneath my feet. The war isn't over yet. I clutched the eviction notice with both hands, as if holding it tighter would change the words. The letters blurred through my tears, but the message was crystal clear. Arthur had sold the land underneath all 3 Thornton hardware locations, weeks before I took over ownership of the company. The buildings were mine, yes. The business too. But the land, that was his final trump card. And now he was calling it in. I stood frozen in front of the crowd at the town hall. My triumphant moment, just minutes old, had shattered like thin glass under a hammer. Whispers rippled through the room as people exchanged puzzled glances. Arthur didn't have to say a word. His smug expression said it all. Checkmate. I thanked the attendees in a shaking voice and stepped off the stage, still gripping the envelope like it might bite me. Outside the hall, the summer air hit my face like a slap. I sat on a wooden bench, my mind racing through possibilities. If he followed through, I'd lose everything I had just fought to take. All the hard work, all the proof, all the dignity I'd reclaimed, wiped away by one dirty, underhanded move. My phone rang. It was my lawyer, Denise. I just got the notice, she said. He sold the land to a shell company he owns under a different name. It's technically legal, but ethically disgusting. I didn't see this coming, Helen. I'm so sorry. I took a long breath. What happens next? If he files for possession, you have 60 days to vacate or buy back the land, at whatever price he demands. And I knew Arthur. He wasn't going to make it easy. This wasn't about money. It was about humiliation. He wanted me to crawl back. Admit he still had the upper hand. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I went home that evening to the empty silence of our house. The same house we'd built with our own hands in 1978. The same house where we raised Daniel. The same house where I'd been called useless. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at a worn photograph of our first store. The 2 of us smiling in front of it, fresh paint on our jeans, arms wrapped around each other. How did we get here? How did the man I once trusted with my heart become the enemy I now had to outthink? That night I didn't sleep. I walked through the rooms of our home, remembering moments we'd shared. The laughter, the fights, the anniversaries, and the near bankruptcies. I stood in the living room at 3:15 a.m. and whispered to the walls. He wants war? Then let's go to war. The next morning I called Denise again. I want to know everything, I said. Who he sold the land to, what accounts he used, and what skeletons we can drag out of his closets. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, Helen, are you sure? I'm not afraid of him, I replied. Not anymore. Within 48 hours, Denise sent me a confidential report. Arthur had sold the properties on paper to a shell company named Elnora Estates, registered under a holding group in Atlanta. But Elnora Estates wasn't real. It was a pass-through company used to hide ownership. And guess who signed the incorporation documents? Arthur's longtime drinking buddy, Roy Walters. Roy, the same man Arthur bailed out of tax fraud trouble in the 90s. The same man who once drunkenly flirted with me at a company Christmas party, thinking I wouldn't tell Arthur. But I did. Arthur laughed it off, said, Roy's harmless. Now Roy was being used as a puppet. Arthur thought he was clever. He assumed I'd panic and run. But what he didn't know was that I had something he could never fake. History. I drove straight to Roy's house that Thursday. A modest brick home with chipping paint and an overgrown lawn. When he opened the door, He was in a mustard-stained tank top and slippers, eyes wide with surprise. "Helen," he blinked. "What brings you here?" "I'm here as a friend, Roy. A friend who knows how much debt you're in." He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know what you're talking about." $84,000 in back taxes, I interrupted. "Your daughter's college fund is nearly gone. And you just signed your name to a fraudulent land transfer that can be traced right back to Arthur. That puts you at the center of a civil conspiracy." He swallowed hard. "You help me fix this," I said softly, "and I'll make sure the IRS never sees a thing." Roy didn't answer right away. But the next morning, Denise had a notarized statement from him admitting to the fraud. We filed it with the court before Arthur could even smell what was coming. Then we filed for an emergency injunction to freeze the eviction. But even as we did, Arthur retaliated again. He showed up at my house. Not the office, my house. He stood on the porch, dressed in all black like he was attending a funeral, eyes cold as slate. I opened the door slowly, staying behind the screen. "Don't do this, Helen," he said. "You're going to ruin everything." I stared back at him. "You already ruined everything." "I was trying to save what's left of it," he shouted. "The business is dying. You think you can run it better than me? Look at you, you're 78. You're not a leader. You're a memory." That one stung. But I didn't flinch. "You keep calling me a memory," I said, voice steady. "But you forget. Memories build legacies. You're too busy erasing to remember that." Then I shut the door. I stood there, back pressed against the frame, hands trembling, but not from fear. From resolve. He wanted to destroy me. But I had already started something bigger than revenge. I had started my legacy. A new chapter. One that didn't include Arthur Thornton. But before I could finish writing it, something happened that changed everything. The bank called. They had flagged suspicious activity on the company's payroll account. And when I checked it, over $100,000 was missing. Transferred into an account I didn't recognize. Under a name I didn't know. Arthur had help. And I had a traitor inside my company. If you've ever had someone come at you from both the front and behind, drop a comment. Like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because next chapter will expose the betrayal from within and how I uncovered a secret that nearly broke me. The storm is here. The moment I saw the transaction log, my stomach dropped. The company payroll account had been siphoned in 3 separate transfers over 10 days. $30,000 here, $42,000 there, another $35,000 gone. I stared at the numbers on my screen, unable to breathe. The account name receiving the money wasn't Arthur's. It wasn't Roy's. It wasn't any name I recognized. But that made it worse. It meant I wasn't just under attack from my husband. I was being robbed from within. I sat frozen at my desk, the afternoon sun casting long, accusing shadows across the office. I thought about every person I had smiled at in the last week. Every employee I'd shaken hands with. Every loyal friend who had sworn they were with me. Had one of them betrayed me? Called Denise immediately. She moved fast. We flagged the account, froze the payroll system, and sent a subpoena request to the bank to uncover the recipient's identity. But we were told it would take 5 to 7 business days. And I didn't have 5 to 7 days. Arthur was circling. I could feel it. I needed to know who it was now. So I did something I swore I'd never do again. I called my son Daniel. We hadn't spoken in months. The last conversation we had was a screaming match over Arthur's treatment of me. Daniel had taken his father's side, said I was making things harder than they needed to be, that I should let Dad run the business. That night, I told him he could leave and take his opinions with him. But now I needed his help. Because Daniel was the only one who still had access to the company's old IT system, and he knew every firewall and password. Called twice. No answer. Then I texted him one line. "Someone is stealing from me. From your family. I need you." 10 minutes later he called. "Mom, I need you to come," I said quietly. "Now." He arrived by evening looking thinner, older. The tiredness in his eyes wasn't just physical. It was guilt. But there was no time for emotion. I walked him through the transfers, the hidden account, the disappearing funds. "I know who can help," he finally said. "Dad's old assistant, Grace. She still has backdoor access to the system." He texted her. She agreed to meet us the next day in a quiet corner of the local library. She looked nervous, thin lips, fidgety hands, but she brought what we needed. A log of recent system entries. That's when we saw it. The employee who authorized the transfers. Angela. My assistant. The woman who brought me tea every morning. The woman who called me Mom when no one else was around. The woman I trusted like a daughter. She had been working for Arthur. Feeding him information. Helping him bleed me dry. Daniel looked at me, face pale. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear." I nodded, numb. "I believe you." We went back to the office. I asked Angela to meet me in the conference room. She walked in, smiling like usual. "Everything okay, Mrs. Thornton?" I slid the printed transaction report across the table. Her smile cracked. "I don't know what that is," she whispered. "Don't lie to me," I said softly. "I changed your diapers, Angela. I taught you how to ride a bike. Your mother worked for me 20 years ago. I paid for your textbooks." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why?" She broke down. "He promised me a promotion. He said he'd let me manage one of the branches once he took back over. I didn't think you'd notice. I needed the money. My husband left. I've got 2 kids and I would have helped you," I said, choking on my own heartbreak. "If you had just asked, I would have helped you." She reached across the table. "I'm sorry, Helen. I didn't mean to." I stood up before she could touch me. "You can pack your things." Her sobs followed me all the way to the office door. The betrayal stung, but it lit something deeper in me. A fire I didn't know was still burning. I was done playing defense. The next morning, I walked into the company meeting room with a printed list of everyone's access levels. I slashed privileges, changed every password, reassigned roles. If they were loyal, they stayed. If not, they were out. No speeches. No explanations. Then I called a real estate developer I knew from church, Mrs. Lydia Sanderson. She was a widow in her 70s who had built a portfolio of warehouses and commercial lots. I asked her over coffee if she had any properties near the original Thornton hardware location. She nodded. 3. And one's been vacant for months. I told her I wanted to lease it. Maybe even buy. She tilted her head. "You planning to move?" "Not just move," I said. "Rebrand." Her eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes. I'm retiring the Thornton name." She smiled. "Good for you, Helen. You've earned your own." That week, I signed a new lease, hired a branding firm, and started the process of dissolving Thornton Hardware. In its place, I was building something new. Grace and Grit Supply Company. Named after my mother, Grace, who taught me how to swing a hammer. And for the grit it took to survive 50 years of being underestimated. Word got around fast. Arthur caught wind 2 days later when he drove by the new location and saw the fresh logo being painted across the warehouse doors. He called me that night. "You're erasing our legacy," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm reclaiming it." But that name, our name, meant something. I laughed. It did. And now it means regret. He hung up. But I wasn't done. I had one more surprise. The same night, I filed a motion in court, attached to Roy's affidavit and the account hacking logs. Fraud, embezzlement, and attempted corporate sabotage. Arthur Thornton was about to face a public reckoning. But then, something unexpected happened. The morning of our court date, I received a text. From Daniel. "Dad's in the hospital. They don't know if he'll make it." And just like that, all the anger in my chest collapsed. Because no matter what he had done, he was still my husband. Still the man I once loved. And now he was clinging to life. If you've ever stood between justice and compassion, tell me in the comments. Like, subscribe, and come back for the next chapter. because now I had to make a choice that would change the ending, for better or worse. I stood outside the ICU doors, my hands shaking as I held a styrofoam cup of hospital coffee that had long gone cold. Everything smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. Machines beeped steadily in the background, and the hallway lights were far too bright for how dark my heart felt. Arthur was inside, unconscious. One half of his face was paralyzed. His speech, if he ever regained it, would likely be slurred. His right arm wouldn't move. According to the doctor, he'd suffered a major stroke sometime during the night, alone in that big house we once called home. The same house where he once called me useless. Now he lay helpless in a bed, tubes in his arms, a machine breathing for him. And for the first time in 52 years, I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, victory, grief. None of it fit. All of it hurt. Daniel sat beside me, his elbows on his knees, staring blankly at the white tile floor. They said it could have been stress, he muttered. They said it built up. I didn't respond. Because the truth was, I didn't cause this. Arthur did. Through decades of pride, betrayal, and cruelty. Through bad choices and a soul so hardened he couldn't even let someone love him right. Still, I walked into his room. And when I saw him, frail and sunken and quiet, I remembered the man who once sang Al Green to me on our wedding night. The man who cried when Daniel was born. The man who worked double shifts to buy me my first sewing machine. The man I used to know. But that man had died long ago. This shell wasn't him. Still, I leaned in close to his ear and whispered, "You broke everything. But I'll still honor the good we had." And I meant it. I told the nurse to keep me updated. I gave permission for his treatment to continue. I even told Daniel I would help pay for in-home care if needed. But I wouldn't stay. I had my own life to live now. My phone buzzed just as I walked out of the hospital. Denise had left a voicemail. "Helen, we have a new problem. Arthur's lawyer has filed a last-minute request to freeze your rebranding until a full investigation is complete. They're trying to stall you." Course they were. Arthur might have been down, but his legal team was still playing games. They wanted to trap Grace and Grit Supply Company in limbo. Delay permits, freeze bank accounts, disrupt supplier relationships, bleed me dry through bureaucracy. I knew this move well. Arthur had used it on competitors for years. And now they were using it on me. But I wasn't afraid. I went straight to the office and called a staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the break room. Old faces, new hires, even Daniel. I stood at the head of the table and said, "This company isn't just about concrete and tools. It's about standing tall when you've been broken. It's about grit. Which means we don't fold because someone sends a threatening letter." Then I held up the new business cards. Grace and Grit Supply Company. With my name, Helen G. Thornton, founder and CEO. In bold print at the bottom. Passed them out one by one. "Let them try to stop us," I said. "They'll just be confirming we're a threat." The room clapped. Some even teared up. But as the team went back to work, Daniel pulled me aside. "There's something you need to see," he said. He took me to his office and opened an old hard drive from our former IT system. One Arthur had forgotten to wipe. And in it we found something shocking. Dozens of secret audio recordings. Of me. Of staff. Of private meetings. Arthur had bugged the office for years, documenting every conversation, every whisper, every flaw. He had built a digital library of leverage to use against anyone who opposed him, including me. But in doing so, he had also recorded himself, including a conversation where he admitted, in clear, unfiltered words, to forging my signature on a secondary loan years ago, a loan that nearly cost us our first store. He had hidden that from me for 2 decades. Now I had the proof. "This changes everything," Denise said after reviewing the files. "You can move to dissolve any remaining rights he has to the business or the brand. You can even go after personal damages if you want." But I didn't want money. I wanted truth. And now I had it. So I drafted a public statement. I released the recording. I attached it to a press release explaining the full history of Thornton Hardware, its rise, its rot, and its rebirth. The article went viral in our community within 24 hours. The headline read, "After 50 years of marriage, he called her useless, so she took back everything." Emails flooded in from women across the country. Letters poured in from retired nurses, housewives, and grandmothers who had been belittled, erased, underestimated. They weren't just rooting for me. They were me. And yet, just as I began to celebrate the tide turning, a call came in from the hospital. Arthur had woken up. He was conscious and asking for me. Daniel stood beside me, hesitant. "You don't have to go," he said. But I nodded. "I do. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure." When I walked into his hospital room, Arthur looked at me. Not with venom but something else. Recognition. Maybe even regret. His voice was hoarse and broken. "You won." I pulled a chair close. "I didn't do this to win, Arthur. I did it to survive." He closed his eyes. A tear slipped down the side of his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought if I kept control I'd matter." "You mattered," I said gently. "You just didn't know how to share the space." Silence filled the room. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You were never useless. I was just scared of how strong you really were." And just like that, the hate dissolved. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. I stood, kissed his forehead and whispered, "Rest. The legacy is safe now." I left the room with no intention of coming back. Because I had a company to run. A legacy to rebuild. A story to finish. But just as I returned to my office, Denise ran in holding a new envelope. "Emergency notice," she said breathlessly. "Arthur changed his will before the stroke. You need to see this." Opened it. And what I read next would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. If this chapter gave you chills, don't leave now. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Next chapter will reveal the shocking contents of that will, and the final twist Arthur left behind. You won't believe it. The envelope was thick, sealed in red wax, and bore the stamp of a downtown Charleston law firm I didn't recognize. I sat down slowly, palms sweating, heart pounding as I peeled it open. My fingers trembled, not because I was scared of what Arthur had left me, but because I knew him too well. He didn't do anything without a purpose. Denise leaned over my shoulder as I unfolded the pages. The first lines were what you'd expect in any last will and testament. Legal language, name, date, intent. But it was the second page that knocked the air from my lungs. Arthur Thornton had changed his will 2 months before the stroke. And in it, he had left nothing to me. Nothing. Not the house. Not his personal savings. Not his pension. Not even the wedding ring I placed on his finger 52 years ago. Instead, everything had been left to his future legacy. His exact words. And the named recipient. Madeline Claire Rowe. 6 years old. I blinked at the name. I didn't know a Madeline. She wasn't in our family. Not our employees' children. Not any godchild. The will stated she was Arthur's biological descendant, and that she would inherit his trust fund, the residual equity from the land sale, and the house. Daniel read over my shoulder and froze. "Wait," he said. "Madeline Rowe." Denise narrowed her eyes. "You know her." Daniel swallowed hard. Dad mentioned a woman named Cassandra Rowe a few times. Said she was just someone from a real estate conference in Atlanta. I never thought anything of it. I looked up slowly, the weight of the realization crashing into my chest. Arthur had a child, a secret daughter, and she had a daughter of her own. My husband had a hidden second family, and he left everything to them. The betrayal hit harder than the word useless ever did. It shattered whatever thin thread of dignity Arthur had regained with that hospital apology. All of it fake. Performance. Even on his deathbed, he had twisted the knife in my back one last time. Denise read through the documents again and shook her head. He made sure to have it notarized and filed with the court. It's airtight. If he dies, they inherit. But the land is already gone, I said, my voice distant. Yes. But the personal accounts, the house, the residual royalties from any licensing deals he had on equipment, those all shift to Madeline. And that wasn't even the worst part. Arthur had also named me in the will as a former spouse. Not even widow. No dignity. No recognition. Just cold legal language. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every smile, every lie. I thought of the years I gave him. The way I buried my dreams so he could chase his. The way I smiled through humiliation and heartache just to keep our home together. I thought about Madeline, just 6 years old. A child caught in a man's legacy of manipulation. And her mother, Cassandra, who had carried on a secret affair with my husband while I cooked his dinner and folded his shirts. Daniel sat with me in the living room. He looked pale, broken. I didn't know, he said. I swear I didn't. I believe you, I whispered. But it still happened. He turned to me. What are you going to do? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't want revenge anymore. But I can't let them erase me. The next day, I filed an official challenge to the will, not to stop Madeline from inheriting, but to ensure that my 52 years of sacrifice were documented, seen, and respected. I requested a court hearing to disclose Arthur's history of fraud, manipulation, and the emotional abuse that preceded the revised will. But even as I prepared for court, something else happened. A letter arrived in my mailbox. It was handwritten, the paper soft and elegant. From Cassandra Rowe. It read, Dear Mrs. Thornton, I know you have every reason to hate me. I didn't know who you were until it was too late. Arthur told me you were divorced, that you wanted nothing to do with the business. I only learned the truth recently, and by then my daughter had already grown to love him as her grandfather. He supported us, yes, but he never told me the full extent of his marriage to you. I only discovered the depth of his lies when I saw your press release. Sorry. Truly. If it means anything, I don't want your home. I don't want his blood money. I've already contacted the attorney and am refusing the inheritance. I'll be signing it over to you and your son. I hope one day you'll forgive me. Tears slipped down my face. Not for Arthur, but for the truth, how long it had been buried. And for the child who would now grow up without knowing the full measure of the man whose name she bore. The next week in court I presented everything. The audio tapes, the forged signatures, the assistant's confession, the will, and Cassandra's letter. The judge didn't take long. Arthur's last-minute will was deemed coercive and influenced by unethical behavior. His remaining estate was split equally between myself and Daniel, with a portion placed in a fund for Madeline's education as a gesture of grace. Arthur died 3 days later. I didn't attend the funeral, but I sent flowers. The card read, We build legacies with truth, not secrets. Helen. And now, Grace and Grit Supply Company was thriving. We opened our 3rd location, hosted our first Women in Trade scholarship, and hired more women over 60 than any other supplier in the county. The building now bore my name, my story. But just as I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony that month, with cameras flashing and applause echoing, someone tapped me gently on the shoulder. A little girl with big brown eyes. Are you Helen? She asked softly. I turned and knelt. Yes, sweetheart. She looked down at her shoes. My name's Madeline. My breath caught in my throat. I made this for you, she said, handing me a drawing. It was a crayon sketch of a big store with the sign Helen's Place. And 2 women holding hands, smiling. Mom says you're brave, she whispered. I think so too. Hugged her. And in that moment, everything Arthur ever did fell away like dust. 'Cause I had survived it, rewritten it, and turned pain into purpose. If this chapter touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Like, subscribe, and prepare for the next chapter, the final chapter, where I return to the home we built and finally decide what to keep and what to let go. I hadn't been back to the old house in over 6 months. Not since the day Arthur was admitted to the ICU and the truth came pouring out like water from a shattered dam. After everything, the forged documents, the secret child, the betrayal, I had walked out of that house carrying only a handbag and a spine of steel. But now that he was gone, and the court had returned full ownership of the estate to me and Daniel, the time had come to face it all. Every brick, every floorboard, every memory. Daniel met me in the driveway, the key to the front door dangling from his fingers like it burned. He gave it to me in silence, and I nodded. "I'll go in alone," I told him gently. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw in my eyes that I needed this moment. So I stepped into the house, alone. The door creaked open like it remembered my touch. The smell hit me first: old leather, lemon polish, and something faintly bitter, like the ghost of a cigar. The living room was just as we'd left it. My knitting chair sat in the corner, untouched. A photo of Arthur and me from 1985 still hung over the fireplace, both of us smiling like the world had no claws. I walked slowly through the house. In the kitchen, I ran my hand across the tiled counter where I'd served dinner for 52 years, sometimes in silence, sometimes in tears, sometimes in love. I opened the cabinet above the stove and saw the old tin where I used to keep my secret cookie stash, marked oregano, so Arthur wouldn't go snooping. In the hallway closet I found our wedding album. The leather cover was cracked, but the photos inside were still vivid. Arthur in his white tuxedo. Me in my simple lace gown. Smiling. Young. Stupid. I carried the album into our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. This room had seen every version of me. The hopeful bride, the exhausted mother, the humiliated wife, the determined woman. The silence in the room was so loud it made my chest ache. I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All from Arthur. None addressed to me. They were unsent drafts. Angry rants. Love letters to Cassandra. Apologies to Daniel he never sent. A few were written to no one at all. Just thoughts scrawled in shaky handwriting. One line stopped me cold. "I don't know how to love Helen anymore, but I don't know how to live without her either." I folded the letter and placed it back carefully. It didn't change anything, but it explained a lot. I stood and walked to the garage. That's where Arthur had stored his tools, his lawn chairs, and, tucked behind the old water heater, the safe. I had always ignored it. He kept it locked, even from me. But Daniel had found the combination after Arthur's passing, hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible in his study. I turned the dial slowly. Click. Inside were several stacks of cash, a few documents, and a small velvet box. Opened it. Inside was a gold necklace with a tiny H engraved on the pendant. A tag read, "For our 50th. I just didn't know how to say sorry. Tears blurred my vision. Too little. Too late. I left the house carrying only the necklace and the wedding album. Everything else would be boxed up and donated. I didn't need a mausoleum of misery. I met Daniel outside and handed him the album. "Want to help me burn the rest?" He nodded slowly. We built a fire pit that night behind the new Grace and Grit supply warehouse. Just the two of us. No fanfare. No grand speech. We tossed old ledgers, faded documents, printed emails, the court filings, Arthur's letters, everything that represented the pain. Flames swallowed them whole. As the fire burned, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The next morning I made my decision. I sold the old house. Used the money to expand the scholarship fund we'd started under Grace and Grit. It would help older women return to school, nurses, bookkeepers, mothers, caretakers, women like me who had given up everything and now wanted something back. I also launched a program within the company. Legacy Shapers. Every quarter, we hired one woman over 60 who had been pushed out of work, overlooked, or left behind. We trained her, gave her fair pay, benefits, voice. Our first hire was Angela, the assistant who once betrayed me. She showed up at my door, broken, jobless, scared. "I don't deserve a second chance," she whispered. Smiled. Neither did Arthur. But I gave him one anyway. We shook hands. 3 months later, she was running our accounting team like a general. Grace and Grit became more than a business. It became a revolution. One night, at our first anniversary gala, I stood on stage under soft lights, looking at a sea of women, workers, families, all built from what I was told I didn't have: strength, vision, usefulness. And I said to them, I was married for 50 years. I gave and gave until there was nothing left but silence. Then he called me useless. But useless women don't build empires. Useless women don't raise children. Useless women don't survive betrayal and come back stronger. I wasn't useless. I was unseen. Now I am seen. And so are you. The crowd stood, applauded, cried. Not for me. For themselves. After the event, a woman in a walker approached me slowly. Her eyes were rimmed red. I lost everything in my divorce, she said. I thought I was finished. You're just getting started, I told her, placing a hand on her shoulder. That night I walked home under the stars. Lone. But never lonely. Because I was no longer defined by a last name, a title, or a man's opinion of my worth. I was Helen Grace Thornton. Founder. Mother. Survivor. And I had rewritten the ending of my story with ink made from fire. If this story moved you, share it. Let someone know that no matter how late in life it feels, you can always reclaim your voice. You can always rise. And you are never, ever useless. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe in second chapters. And strong women who write their own endings. 2 weeks after the gala, I received a phone call I never expected. Mrs. Thornton, the woman on the line said. This is Alicia Morris. I'm a producer with a documentary series called American Grit, Women Who Rebuilt Their Lives. I blinked in surprise. Yes. She cleared her throat. We read the article about Grace and Grit Supply, the speech you gave, the Legacy Fund, and, well, we'd like to feature your story in our upcoming season. I sat down slowly. Me. A story on television. I had spent decades in the background, behind Arthur, behind paperwork, behind a counter, behind silence. Now people wanted to hear my voice. After a long pause, I replied, Tell me what you need. 2 months later, a small film crew arrived in Charleston. They filmed the store, the scholarship recipients, the warehouse filled with women in blue coveralls and laughter that echoed across steel beams. They interviewed Daniel, Angela, even Cassandra, who bravely agreed to tell her side of the story on camera to shine light on the damaged secret's cause. But the most emotional moment came when little Madeline was brought in by Cassandra, clutching a toy hammer in her hand. When the crew asked her what she thought Grace and Grit was about, she said shyly, It's where ladies fix things. And everyone in the room cried. After the shoot wrapped, Alicia hugged me. Do you know how many women your age are still hiding? She asked. Still shrinking themselves to make others comfortable? He nodded. I do. Do you know what makes you different? She asked. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't just walk out of the fire, she whispered. You built something from the ashes. That night, I watched the first cut of the documentary in my living room. Just me, a bowl of popcorn, and the echo of everything I used to be. It was raw, honest, painful, but powerful. I didn't flinch when the part came where Arthur called me useless, because that word had no power anymore. It had been replaced by others. Words from employees, from customers, from strangers online who now called me inspiring, resilient, a leader. But just when I thought the past was finally quiet, life knocked again. Daniel came to my office with a manila envelope in his hand and a complicated look on his face. This came from Arthur's old bank, he said. Apparently, they just completed a probate search on a dormant safety deposit box. He set it on my desk. Inside, one faded photograph, one cassette tape, and one letter. I picked up the photo first. It was of Arthur, no more than 20, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. Pregnant, smiling, leaning against him. Dated 1969. 5 years before I ever met him. The letter was written in Arthur's hand. Helen, you were never meant to see this. But if you're reading it, I'm probably gone. And maybe it's time the truth came out. Before you I had a son. He died before he turned 2. Heart defect. I never told anyone. Buried the pain. When I met you, I saw salvation. But I never healed. I held on to control like it was the only thing keeping me alive. I know I failed you. But I want you to know I never stopped loving you. Even when I was cruel. This tape. It's a message I recorded years ago. For you. If I ever found the courage to be honest. My hands trembled as I placed the cassette into Daniel's old player. Arthur's voice, younger and clearer than I remembered, filled the room. Helen. If you ever hear this, I want you to know you saved me. I just never knew how to say thank you without making it about me. I was afraid of how powerful you were becoming. Because if you ever realized you didn't need me, I knew I'd lose you. The tape ended in silence. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since 1971. Not forgiveness. Not erasure. But understanding. Arthur was a broken man who broke others. But I was no longer one of his casualties. I was a rebuilder. The next morning I held a meeting with the leadership team. I've made a decision, I said. In 2 months, I'm stepping down as CEO. Gasps filled the room. Not because I'm tired. But because grace and grit is bigger than me now. Angela leaned forward. Who will lead us? Smiled. You will. She froze. Me. You earned it, I said. The best redemption stories begin with someone who made mistakes and chose differently. Angela cried. We all did. And as I walked out of that office for the last time as CEO, I didn't feel sad. Felt free. But there was one final thing I needed to do. I returned to the house. Now empty, ready for demolition. I stood in the doorway, took a breath, and walked room to room. Then I planted one final nail in the doorpost. Small plaque. It read, Here lived a woman who gave her life to a man, then reclaimed it in full. Asterisk. This house did not make her strong. She made it through despite the house. Asterisk. I walked away with the sun warm on my back. No bitterness. No shame. Just peace. And the knowledge that even after 50 years of being overlooked, used, betrayed, and dismissed, I rose. And I left footprints behind for every woman who needs to do the same. If this final chapter touched your spirit, if you saw yourself in Helen's journey, please like, comment, and subscribe. Her story is more than fiction. It's a reflection of millions of women who are still reclaiming their names. Tell someone today. You are not useless. You are unseen. And you have more to write. The morning of the demolition, I arrived just before sunrise. The house stood there, empty, quiet, and almost defiant. Weather-worn shutters dangled by a nail, and ivy had crept up the side porch, wrapping around the wooden railing like time itself was trying to hold on. I stood across the street, watching the demolition crew prepare their machines. The bulldozer growled to life, and the driver looked at me, waiting for a nod. But I wasn't ready, not yet. I stepped forward slowly. One last walk across the cracked driveway, memories clinging to every footstep. Inside that house, I had stitched clothes by candlelight when we couldn't pay the power bill. Inside that house, I had cooked Arthur's favorite cornbread after finding lipstick on his collar. Inside that house I had buried my voice, then slowly dug it back up with my bare hands. But I wasn't here to mourn a house. I was here to bury the version of myself who thought she had to live inside someone else's story. I turned to the crew and gave a firm nod. The first blow came hard. The front porch crumpled like paper. The walls groaned, then gave way, brick by brick. The bedroom, the one I once shared with Arthur, split in half, revealing the old headboard and faded wallpaper before collapsing into dust. Daniel stood beside me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. We watched the house fall. Together. When it was over, all that remained was a pile of splinters and memory. I handed the foreman a small white envelope. Inside it was a note. To every woman who was told her worth depended on what she gave. This is what reclaiming looks like. We poured a bucket of dirt over the rubble. A symbolic burial. And as I turned away, I felt something loosen in my chest. A weight I didn't even know I was still carrying. Later that afternoon, I walked into the new headquarters of Grace and Grit Supply Company. The building was twice the size of the old one. Glass-paneled walls, solar-powered roofing, a full childcare wing for working mothers. The front entrance was lined with photos of our legacy women, those over 60 who had joined our team after being laid off, left behind, or underestimated. At the top of the hallway, framed in gold leaf, was a quote: "You are not too old. It is not too late. And you are not finished." Helen Grace Thornton. Angela greeted me with a clipboard and a tight hug. She was CEO now. Confident, focused, brave. Her hair was up in a bun, and her ID badge read, Angela Rose, Chief Executive Officer, in bold lettering. "We landed the federal contract," she said with a grin. 27 more jobs coming in next month. Clapped my hands. That's the power of women who don't quit. Then I walked through the company garden, where some of our women were planting herbs during their lunch break. One of them, Eunice, 71, a former janitor, waved at me with dirt-streaked gloves. "Miss Helen," she called. "Come taste this basil. Grown with grace, just like you taught us." I laughed. "I didn't teach you. You just finally had space to bloom." Before heading home, I made one last stop. The community center. That same afternoon, we were hosting our very first Reclaim Her Name workshop, a storytelling initiative where elderly women could write and share the parts of their lives that had never been spoken aloud. I sat in the back as one woman stood at the mic, her voice trembling. "My name is Darlene. I'm 83. And until today, I never told anyone my husband spent our retirement on another woman. I stayed quiet for 20 years because I thought no one would listen." The room fell silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon the room erupted in applause. That night, I received an email from the producers of American Grit. The documentary had been picked up by a major network. They were planning to turn it into a limited series. They wanted me to consult and to star in the pilot. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled tea on my laptop. From invisible wife to lead character. Arthur would have hated it. I replied with 2 words. "I'm in." Then I logged off and stepped outside into the soft twilight, sitting on the porch of my small, peaceful bungalow by the marsh. Wind rustled the grass. Crickets sang. And for once, everything inside me was still. This wasn't the life I had planned. It was the life I earned. And I realized something. I didn't just reclaim my name, my legacy, or my dignity. I reclaimed time. Time to live. Time to laugh. Time to be. So when the wind whispered through the marsh, I whispered back. I'm still here. I'm still rising. And I'm not done yet. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If Helen's story reminded you of your own strength or someone else's, please like, comment, and share this story. Because someone out there still needs to hear. It's never too late. You're not too old. And you have more chapters left. Subscribe to hear the next powerful story. Because we're just getting started.